Right then, let's go.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery for the 24-25 season. MK Battery have been a driving force behind the growth of Powerchair Football, supporting the sport at every level. Their high performance batteries are essential to the game itself, but their impact goes far beyond just supplying equipment. Through their long-standing partnership with the WFA, they've been instrumental in helping clubs, players and competitions develop, ensuring Powerchair Football continues to thrive both nationally and internationally. Their commitment to accessibility and sporting excellence is something we're incredibly grateful for, and it's fantastic to have their continued support powering this podcast. My name is Ryan Sipple, and after a bit of a break, I'm delighted to be back alongside my co-host Alex Dowding. Alex, how are you? The first podcast we've done together since November.
Yeah, it's been a while. I apologise, I've missed a couple, but it's great to be back. Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. I've been very busy in the world of Powerchair Football and a few other bits as well outside. So yeah, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Great to hear. And joining us today, we have Ellie Curran, a Powerchair football player competing in the Premiership with Greenbank, a passionate advocate for gender equality and the author of a fascinating dissertation that examines the barriers disabled females face both in and out the sport. This episode is dedicated to International Women's Day, a time to celebrate the achievements of women in Powerchair football, while also recognising the work that still needs to be done to improve representation. Currently, only 11% of registered Powerchair football players in England are female, and as a sport that prides itself on inclusivity, we know there's more to do to ensure women and girls feel fully supported, valued and encouraged to take part. Also in this episode, we'll be exploring Ellie's journey in Powerchair football, her research on the barriers that women face in sport, and the key changes needed to improve inclusion and equality for future generations. Ellie, a massive thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you?
First of all, thank you, Ryan and Alex, for inviting me on the 2-on-1 podcast. I'm very well, still recovering from the last Premiership weekend, but I'm all good, and it looks like we've got a very interesting podcast lined up.
Absolutely we do. It's our pleasure to have you. I will wholeheartedly agree that it was a very long, grueling Premiership weekend. Certainly when you're referencing Greenbank having 4 players for the majority of the weekend without some key individuals. But it was a good showing nonetheless. But we've hopefully all had a little bit of time to recover, and we can dive into, as you've just said, a very intriguing but important episode that will celebrate International Women's Day. We have so much to unpack, it's fair to say, but before we do, I want to go back to the start, if you don't mind, Ellie. How did you first get involved with Powerchair football, and what was your first experience with the sport itself?
Oh well, we're going way back. So my initial involvement with Greenbank, well, before I go into that, a little bit of background. Greenbank is a centre and charity based in Liverpool, providing sporting opportunities and educational opportunities for disabled people and Paralympians So when I was about 6 or 7, Greenbank actually come into my primary school to run an after school club on Powerchair hockey. They didn't run football back then, but I become absolutely obsessed, and then from that point Greenbank actually established a hockey night down at Greenbank for a lot more young people from local schools to come together, and that was a lot more of a recreational thing to do after school. And then I think we got to the point where me and another player actually seen Power Football on YouTube, and we absolutely begged Jerry and Pete to buy some Power Football balls and let us have a kick around. And that was it really. We had quite old chairs, but Pete, our mechanic, got to the point where he actually began to make chairs that could also play Power Football as well as hockey. So we had the infrastructure to make a Power Football night, and after a couple of years recreationally, we again begged to enter the Northwest League, and ever since then, every year we've gone from strength to strength, and my position in that team become a lot more competitive over recreational.
What year was the initial request to Jerry to purchase them balls initially?
I think about 2012 we had those very big gimbal footballs. I don't know if you remember them, but they were absolutely humongous, and we were just playing with them. And you know, Marcus still come back then every now and again, but the power he got on the balls meant the balls actually come off the floor quite a lot. So I think it was a bit more of a health and safety thing, but it actually turned out to be the establishment of a whole new club.
I think when you look at Greenbank now, they are one of the leading sides in the country, and I didn't know. Obviously, I was aware of its background in power hockey, and that kind of be the origins. I didn't know Powerchair Football came after that, but they are a joy to watch in the Premiership, and now there's so much ambition around the club. It's so nice to see kind of the origins of where it was and where it is now.
I remember Greenbank in the early days of my involvement in the sport as well. I got involved in 2015. I think you were just starting to come onto the national radar at that point and moving out from regional leagues into certainly trying to get into the National League. And then I remember you getting in there, and it's been a joy to watch you guys grow as well, from a fledgling National League team up to a Premiership powerhouse, really, I suppose, be the best description as you guys are now. That's really lovely to hear that as a story, Ellie, and where that's all come from. But let's get on to where you're at now, I suppose, and what has led you to research gender and disability in sport, certainly at your degree level. I know you've got ambitions and potential for more research, but talk about the research you've kind of done so far.
So basically, it all really happened by happenstance, really. I initially went to uni to partake in a criminology degree, and my first initial assessment was on disability and the criminal justice system. And ever since that essay, I was kind of begged to swap over to a course called Sin and Disability, and within that we obviously have a big emphasis on the social model and barrier removal. And early on into that course, I kind of acknowledged that there was a lot of work on the barriers for wheelchair users, but not necessarily powered wheelchair users. And then that kind of snowballed into looking at the experience of disabled women who are powered wheelchair users. And when I was selecting a topic to do for my dissertation, it was advised do it on something that you really love. And obviously, power football comes straight to the front of my mind. And the initial unpacking of what was already out there, I could see a real gap between the experiences of disabled women, the experiences of disability sports, and there was a kind of middle ground where the roofs two haven't really met to uncover the barriers of power wheelchair users who are female, who wish to partake in sport. So that's where it all came from, really.
Thanks. I suppose there's an excellent sort of observation in that Powerchair football is obviously mixed gender, or there's no gender splits at all across the sport, and that's probably the only impairment-specific version of football that does that, and possibly one of the few sports in the world that does that, certainly up to international level. So that intersectionality between disability and gender doesn't often occur across an entire sport. So there was probably, or I don't know, there's not, I imagine, a great deal of research across sport in general that covers those that scenario that we've got.
Exactly, and obviously, I don't know how many viewers are aware, but a dislocation is quite often heavily reliant on the literature that you can find. So I was having a real battle trying to even look at women in able-bodied sports and bringing that into power football, because even then there's not many sports that are like us, as you said before, where we have an open gendered format, which again spurred me on to understand why that might be.
So that sets, I suppose, the platform for the research and what you've looked into. A bit of background on you then. There's a question I've got down, which is, I think I'm going to know the answer to, but let's have it shared for our listeners. Where does your passion for equality come from? Where does that fight in you and that determination come from?
That's a huge one. At the end of the day, I think even though I am a disabled person myself, my education journey up to starting uni wasn't the best. You know, I went to an all-girls high school, by which I didn't really fit in, and I didn't know why, but it was always, oh, it is what it is. I can go and play power football on a Wednesday night with all my mates, so I weren't really aware of those inequalities. It was more that journey with university, kind of figuring out who I was, but also learning about all these intersectional topics, whereby I've looked back on my journey and kind of, I don't want to say it was self-transformative, but I've kind of really found another level of value for power football, by which I deem it to be more, in the mainstream, rather than having players who come to our club by the off chance. I think there should be much more opportunity and awareness to get young people into the game.
So kind of your combination of your experience that you had, followed by the education at university level, kind of opened your eyes to the sort of the academic context in which your personal experiences sit.
Yeah, exactly. But in a way, of kind of how can I use my experiences to a degree to learn about the other dynamic experiences of other players and kind of looking into what we already have, but also what still needs to be done.
I think this passion for equality is not only evident in what you're saying now, but in your dissertation. So if you don't mind, I just want to kind of unpack and talk about your final year dissertation in a little bit more detail. I think from my point of view, having read it and we've got together to talk about how it's so relevant to Powerchair football, in a nutshell, from my point of view, is essentially highlighted the challenges and the experiences of female players in Powerchair football. It's obviously within the title, you talk about examining the barriers that females face both in and out, and the realities of females competing in a male-dominated environment, which is the case with the running game as well, certainly when you compare male numbers to female numbers. Can you give a little synopsis into your dissertation and the process of getting to a final conclusion?
Yeah, I'll do my best anyway. So, as I said earlier, I found a real gap of the experiences of disabled women and then experiences of disability sports. They didn't really overlap in an environment which adopts an open gendered format. And I then started to look into, women in sport in general, and a lot of the barriers that I was reading didn't really marry up to the players who are eligible to play our game. As you both know, of course, our game is aimed toward people deemed having a high level of physical impairment. So I started trying to unpack those feminine ideals away from the game in terms of, we are still women and we want to conform to, feminine ideals, but when you have an impairment level much higher to the disabled feminists that are already out there, it can become quite difficult to place yourself. And then linking that to sport, we're told, be polite, be passive, and all these kind of ways in which you should act as a woman, and then looking at the qualities to which women need in sport in general. There was no kind of intertwine I basically aimed to do is kind of be guided by the voices of females in our sport, and they kind of led the whole course of the research, by which I just let them, have an open conversation with me of the barriers in which they thought existed. And what was really interesting was the way that many physical barriers, it was more about I've found this sport in which I can participate in. I can participate in to a degree of being competitive, but then there was a real paradox between being grateful to have found the power football community, but also what can I do better as an athlete in a male-dominated environment by which they didn't want to kind of overstep the mark that could affect their place on the team or in the squad, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. And I, just for some context, we do a lot of work behind the scenes. Ellie, we've got together many times to try and tackle this issue head on, and a lot of it coincides with the launch of the WFA's medium-term strategy. So later in this episode, we'll kind of detail our hopes and our aspirations, but I don't think you have to try and slowly implement your ideas across. I think you have to be kind of on the front foot and say, what can we be doing better to increase female representation? You've stated that it's male dominated, and as I said at the start, just 11% of our registered players are that of females. Something that was touched upon in your dissertation was the barriers and the roadblock, so to speak, of stopping females progressing and stopping females accessing the opportunities that we provide. Do you think that the lack of female representation in not just Powerchair football but wider media and culture has a real impact? Because ultimately you have to see it to be it sometimes.
I think that's the quote, isn't it? You have got to see it to be it, but overall there's not that representation coming through at the rate in which male-dominated sports get. You got this uprise of the women's game and the Euros, and even though that could be a catalyst for our game, I think that's a very early indicator as to whether that will be the case, because again, the players eligible for our game might start engaging in viewing women's football, or might already do, but it's a case of, oh, I like to watch football and be a spectator, but it's getting to the point of capturing these young women and girls and showing them they could actually play a form of football that is for them.
I think it goes back to that representation, and you got to see it to be it. To compare it to the mainstream running game, I think football as a whole saw a huge surge in female participation off the back of the Lionesses' success in 2022. So I've got here a kind of a study that was undertaken by Sport England last year, acknowledged that in December of 2024, 845,000 girls were playing football regularly. That is up from 777,000 just prior to the Lionesses' successful title win in Euros, and then that was 669,000 in 2018. So it shows the momentum of the game, but it needed that catalyst to really spring into life. And I think us as a disability sport are really waiting for that catalyst to show young disabled females that there is opportunities out there in a male-dominated sport, and we are not standing still. We are continually exploring ways in which we can address this head-on, but the first thing you have to do is acknowledge there is a huge discrepancy. In the running game, for every one female, there's 6 males. In the Powerchair football game, you've got around about 1 female for every 9 males. So as long as we can openly acknowledge as an association, as a sport, as a community that we have got so much to do, then that is the beginning of really making meaningful change. And I think going back to your dissertation, these are some of the barriers that you highlight for participation, for development, and it was a really good read. Beyond representation, what other barriers did you come across, and what are the kind of things we need to be doing as a sport to addressing those?
I think first of all, it will be reinforced by participants that they absolutely love the open-gendered format of our game, and there was no radical, we just want girls format or anything of that vein. But I think even though our community is one in which, you can talk to anyone. You go to Nottingham and you feel like there's so many views and viewpoints that you could get from a range of people. I think for the majority of the females in which I interviewed, it was more the kind of ways in which they navigate funding and classification in a sport in which is heavily drives towards, the top impairments that we have in our game. It do say, again, a very male-specific conditions, so kind of trying to navigate that in terms of where to turn to fund chairs in the first place, and also, even though, again, the enjoyment of playing with both male and female, quite a lot of females proposed the ideas of it would be nice to have a deeper affinity with other female players in order to sort of exchange knowledge and experience, because you might not be able to do that in a club in which you're the only young woman or girl in a team of boisterous lads, let's say, and then those conversations between players might give rise to even more barriers that we could use again as a catalyst to break down, but just one specific barrier that I don't think many people might think of, coaching styles between, female coaches and male coaches might drastically change the view of the game for a very young girl who's turned up to try the sport. Again, I'm not that sounded a very generalized statement, but what was meant by that is it took me an awful long time to get to the point where I found my voice in the game in terms of, asking questions, challenging players and tactics, wanting to develop myself. But when you got someone quite young who's new to that environment, they're often quite timid and shy, and I think the way in which you approach that as a coach can heavily determine whether they keep coming back.
So, message for all coaches out there then, what would you give your top 5 tips or top couple of tips in terms of how to create a culture and environment in a coaching session where young female players will feel that confidence and want to come back and feel like that environment is for them?
I think the fundamental one is giving the young woman or girl a voice and a platform to kind of ask initial questions or raise any concerns and really making them feel comfortable that they are entering environment to which their opinion has value, even though they might be, one of the few girls in that squad. And also, I absolutely love the intensity of our game. But another tip might be kind of introducing the game at a very, calmer rate, taking away that competitiveness and maybe taking a bit more time to weave that in and bring the element of fun into it. Another tip, I would say, would be kind of observe how you are talking around the team. And I know it's very easily done, but in some instances I hear a lot of, well done lads, oh come on boys, and I am very quick to go, hello, I'm here, but as a young girl, that can massively put you off the game. And finally, I would look say opportunity, even though the game has very predetermined positions in which you play. I'm a winger, but I've also ensured that I have had experience in other roles as well, so I feel more prepared if the time comes to which I am required to play in a position that I'm not normally playing. So just kind of, asking the player what they would like to work on themselves might be very different to what you think.
I think that goes back to your study in one of the barriers being the perception of ability and preconceived ideas and stereotypes that coaches need to address. They need to ensure that they're not assuming things based off gender. And then obviously the other barriers I think you've spoken about across this podcast are representation in leadership opportunities, so females being given leadership opportunities, and you've also touched on classification regulations. So there's several things that I hope any and everyone that's listening that they can weave into their potential coaching sessions, or just little things, as you've said, about terminology, but you can almost forgive coaches in a way because it is so male dominated. And that's not just players, that's coaches and officials as well. There's a big educational piece that needs to be done across the board. And hopefully a podcast like this can start to break down those barriers to make sure young women and girls feel comfortable, feel nurtured, and feel like they're developing through their early age. We've spoken about your your bachelor's degree, exploring the barriers, we've had discussions about where your studies take you now. Do you want to give a little insight over next steps and the goals and aspirations of maybe the next 12-18 months?
So, at the moment, I am doing a master's in the same course in which I did at undergrad, which is disability studies. And I think the work in which I have done for my undergrad dissertation, I'm at the point where I'm looking to publish that as a journal article to hopefully not only be used, in our country, but kind of sharing it with other zones and delegations throughout the world, and kind of putting this very initial issue in which, I think only touches the outside in terms of what else could be done. And I think that has fueled me to want to look into carrying on, trying to break into academia and really focus on power football. And even though I would very much continue looking at the experiences of women in our game, I'm kind of at a point in which I am looking for funding to undertake a PhD again in power football, but the nature of a PhD is that's where I think I'm gonna open it up a little bit and kind of look into the careers opportunities that could come out of a sport like power football for disabled people who might not have had the PA and careers education that they would have hoped for in secondary school or college or wherever that might be, and kind of, taking it a bit more broader in terms of what's in policy now that doesn't account for the dynamic experiences of our players, but also why aren't we talking about the power football and the power hockeys, all this infrastructure that we're building? There should be signposts and opportunities at school level. Again, I did find power football through primary school, but I am very aware that I was extremely lucky to find it in the way that I did. I'm not really getting into disabled people from a very early age that there are other opportunities outside of your typical sports that you take in schools.
How much funding are you looking for to support a PhD study such as that?
On average, it's normally in the region of £15,000 per year for tuition fees. And then obviously that'll be over a 3 or 4 year period.
Really, that long?
Yeah. But I'm gonna aim for 3, but the 4th is kinda there in case the breadth of the study is much more than I originally anticipate.
I think it's a really meaningful body of work that a lot of people would get a lot of worth out of, because we've spoken about it before, Ellie, about harnessing the skill set of some of our players within our community. And I know Alex and I are really passionate about upskilling individuals so they can take the things they learn within and around Powerchair football into education, into work. And if we can do anything to support that and ensure that players have thriving careers, it would benefit the game massively.
I think, obviously, from the top of my head, I can already name a few individuals that have used their skills to, improve our game. You've got the likes of Jack, who's made the score lineup, and Greg with his commentating skills, and I'm kind of looking at it to a degree in which could we reverse that and kind of show young people that the kind of opportunities are there waiting for them.
It goes back to what you said at the start about representation, about seeing it to be it. And if people can now look at Jack Humphreys with what he's done with the Scoreline app, you can look at Greg Baxter commentating across the world, across various Powerchair football competitions and part of the TNT broadcast at last year's FA Disability Cup. Hopefully people can see that now, so they'll want to be it. But we as an association need to put certain things in place that help bring that talent out of these players.
I can certainly speak on behalf of trustees at this point and say that the intent and the will is there, and we're very much. I talk to people quite a lot about the stuff I do in terms of streaming, etc., and I quite often use the phrase I'm working hard to make myself redundant, and that's I think a theme you'll find in quite a few of the trustees and the way they operate and the way we work is, we are aware that we've got a responsibility in the positions we're in at the moment to grow and govern the sport. And part of that responsibility is to make sure that talented people are given the opportunities and the obstacles are removed, and that's a significant part of the work that we need to do first. So I'm sat here with loads of ideas firing off in my head already. Ellie, you've got a busy time ahead, I can tell you if you leave me in charge of what you're going to be doing for us. But the opportunities we will certainly work very hard to create for people, and we know that talented people will take advantage of them, as a few have done already. So we obviously have our own challenges with capacity and resources, and we will work hard to overcome those as well. But lots of what you're saying and talking about is stuff that's already talked about and on the agenda to an extent with the trustees, but certainly we can do more. That's clear.
I think as a governing body, the idea and the intent is there. It's more of how the work that we're doing is missing in the education system, particularly in mainstream school environments, by which there's a big, call on improving the career choices for all pupils, but at the same time, how are you going to do that if you're not opening the eyes to disabled people, that there's places in which they could develop their skills and aspirations in ways that kind of not deviate from the normative way in which you get into employment, but kind of those alternative opportunities that could be pursued.
Yeah, I think there's probably a fair bit of research on across the board on how people's experiences of PE and sport at junior school and secondary school shape their attitudes towards exercise and sport for life. So that's there. So that's going to be the same across the board. And I think as much as we would love for all statutory services such as schools, social care, etc., to be already on top of these things, they're not going to be due to a variety of factors. And we're probably going to have to be on the front foot on that to try and implement some form of change. And what we really need is a PhD student who can do all that stuff for us.
And 45,000, so she gets funded for the full 3 years. I want to bring this back now. It was really nice to just talk about your aspirations for your PhD, but I want to come back round to kind of equality and female representation in sport. And I want to kind of talk about the WFA's commitment to ensuring equality within our sport. If anyone is new to the sport of powerchair football, it is open age, it is open gender, it is open disability, and we have work to do to increase in female role models, female representation. So I think there needs to be the non-negotiable obligation to ensure that women's contributions are recognised and celebrated, and not just as part of events such as International Women's Day, but all year round, I think it's fair to say. And I know we've recorded this episode set to release on International Women's Day, but it shouldn't need a significant day in the calendar to prompt initiatives or commitments. It should be ingrained in everything we do, and that is kind of what we want going forward. I know our chair, Dean Williams, is so passionate about equality in our sport. He's spoken to you many times, Ellie, about your studies, about your aspirations and your goals. But powerchair football is comprised of only 11% of females. That's not good enough. And whilst we can compare it to the running game with 14.6% making up the overall population, we have work to do. You can take out the male-specific conditions. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD, they comprise 35% of our playing participants. So the picture does change if we remove them from the equation, and the proportion of female players amongst the remaining group does rise to about 17-18%. But there's work to do.
Yeah, I think obviously for a mixed gender sport like ours, it should be a lot higher than the percentage that you just said, and I very much agree with. We can't necessarily compare it to the women's game, because I think even though we are a denomination of football, I think the skill set and the way in which we play, we are much more our own game rather than just a different type of football. And I think if we maybe not stop completely making that comparative, but kind of open it out a lot more in terms of the skills required to play a game like power football, that in itself could be one of the ways in which young girls who maybe don't show interest in the running game will kind of take up the opportunity to go out and find their own local club.
Yeah, I agree completely. And within my objectives as National Development Officer for the Wheelchair Football Association, I'm actually tasked with increasing female provision by 37% across the next 4 years. So hopefully that kind of indicates the commitment to the obligations we have as an association. If we take the current baseline of around about 35 females, we want to see that be at least 50 plus by 2028, which I hope is very much achievable. Another initiative that we're really proud of that is hoping to build on what you've already said with regards to coaches and the female coaches providing environments that can really nurture young female players, is our commitment to increasing the coaches through the FA's Introduction to Coaching Football course. And thanks to funding through the FA, we've already been able to support 5 people within the Powerchair football community, being both players and non-players, to gain their qualifications, helping to develop future females and leaders in our sport. I believe you was a recipient on that course last year, Ellie, am I right?
Yeah, I took it alongside another player and a few other coaches at Greenbank.
And how did you find your Introduction to Coaching course?
I think for someone who was already in the game, I went into it quite narrow-minded in terms of, I'm already gonna know X, Y, and Z. But I think the day in itself, kind of having the opportunity to hear the experiences of other clubs and the ways in which you act as a coach around your players have a detrimental effect on what the players themselves get out of the game, and sort of kind of taking a step back and giving a lot more voice to players and kind of working with them to allow me to implement ways in which they can reach their sporting potential. I do know the FA does offer from CPD about coaching women and girls, and that's something that I am looking into pursuing myself, but also kind of going with the intent of how much this is relevant to our game and kind of what we can take and adapt from that as well to potentially create opportunities for coaches to develop within our governing body.
Yeah, I mean, the FA coaching courses are fantastic, but they are very much tailored to the running game. So bringing them back and making them applicable to Powerchair football makes you have to really get the cogs turning to make sure that what you learn there can be applied and can be effective. But it's great to hear that you felt it was really beneficial, and now you're looking to further that up with CPD, because that's how you continually grow and get better as a coach. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about increasing coaches firstly, but the more coaches we can have in female coaches, the better the environments are for young girls to thrive and learn within Powerchair football. So that is obviously one of the initiatives that the WFA is really passionate about in upskilling female coaches, about the increase from 37% up to 50%. Another thing I want to talk about, Ellie, we've had a long discussion about this, and you've touched on it throughout this podcast, about one of the exciting steps we're taking towards increasing female participation is the creation of female Powerchair football festivals. And these are an initiative designed to provide dedicated space for female players to develop skills, connect with others, which is something you spoke about as being really important. Somewhere you can connect with other females and experience competitive football in an inclusive and supportive setting. So it's something we're working towards, and I'm really excited to see them come into life. However, for these festivals to make a real impact, they need to be shaped by the voices of the women they're designed for. So whilst I, as National Development Officer, will want to support it in any way I can, I think it's really important that they are led by those who understand the experiences, the challenges and the needs of female players firsthand. So I think we're going to create a working group, myself and Ellie, And anyone that wants to be a part of that working group, whether you're a player, a coach, an official, a volunteer, please reach out to one of us so we can help shape these events to make sure they're meaningful, they're engaging, and they're as beneficial as possible. So that's my call to action on this podcast, and it's something we're really excited about.
Yeah, personally, I think it's an excellent initiative by which I actually sat down and read a report by Women in Sport, and they did a very specific study on engagement in sport for disabled teenage girls, and one of the outcomes of that was disabled teenage girls are kind of crying out for spaces in which they could train with other girls that have similar impairments to them, and I'm not sure whether power football was included within those initial field work, reports, but I think, again, we are a very unique sport in which we are compared to the able-bodied game, by which it is split genders, but we're not. So I think that in itself can distort many truths that are in our game, and coming together and providing that space, I think it not only allows players already in the game to, come together and maybe exchange knowledge on training or coaching or navigating experience of the athletes, but actually creating a space whereby hopefully younger girls who are coming out to try the game can actually have the confidence to take part and get that initial feel for the game from girls and women who are already in it. Again, seeing it to believe it is a massive form of representation, and that in itself, hopefully, it will allow the young girls to go away and find their own teams and the team participating by that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fantastic initiative, and the one of the main drivers, as you've pointed out, is our sport is structured in a way that means that gender-separated spaces don't exist naturally because gender-separated competition doesn't exist. So there's no need for those squads to be put together or training sessions to be put together specifically for that purpose. The other thing I wanted to say was we've talked a lot about representation in terms of players and coaches, also in governance and leadership in terms of organisations. We're behind on that. We're keen to address that as an issue, and getting involved in this initiative from an organisational point of view would be a great step in development for someone who's maybe not confident to step into a governance role yet. But this could give you some experiences and give you some skill sets by being involved that is part of a pathway towards being involved in governance of our sport and up at the top level. And we can look at our governance and say, it's open to anybody, but that's not necessarily acknowledging the barriers to get there in the first place and creating pathways for people to develop their skills and giving people the opportunities to do that is important as well. So being involved in the organising of this would be a great opportunity for people as well. And if it's something you think, I might be able to do that with some support, the support is going to be there. So step up and put your name in the hat and come and get involved.
I think that we've broken it down really nicely. We've acknowledged the issues and the barriers that are there. We hope that people use this as kind of a catalyst to address some of the issues head on, whether that's trying to increase female players, whether that's providing opportunities for coaches or volunteers or match officials. But us as an association, as Alex has just pointed to, we're not standing still on this. We want to be really proactive, and I hope this podcast is the first step to doing that. It's really important to focus on the goal of increasing participation, but it's just as important to recognise the contributions women have made to Powerchair football already. So now I'm going to bring in the Jeff the Ref stat section of the episode. So over the years, female players, officials, leaders have set records, they have broken barriers, and they have left a lasting impression on the sport. So I'm just going to roll through a few standout stats from some of the females that have played Powerchair football over the years to show there is some real trailblazers. And if you want to see it, you need to see it to be it. A number of these are still playing. So if you're a young aspiring Powerchair football female, look no further. So let's go from the start. Kath Goldsborough, a goal scoring sensation. She made history in Powerchair football, becoming the first Premiership top scorer in back-to-back seasons. So she was top in 2013-14 and 14-15. Can you guess the only other two players that can boast a similar stat of being consecutive back-to-back Premiership top goal scorers?
Oh, I want to say Marcus Harrison.
Marcus Harrison is one, and the other is that of Mr. John Balding. So if you want to see a female being an absolute trailblazer, look no further than Kath Goldsborough. So within those seasons, 32 and 48 respectively, so not bad at all. And with 217 career goals, she is of course the highest scoring female player in the sport's history, but also 6th on the all-time top goal scorer list. Should she score 5 more at National League level, she will leapfrog Harry Boddy in the standings to become the 5th all-time top goal scorer. That's not bad, is it?
Not bad at all.
So next on my Jeff the Rest stats section, we have Nikki Baker, and this woman is a trailblazer. She is now one of only 4 players that have been active and competing in every single season of the National League since 2006. Anyone that was present at the Lee Westwood Sports Centre during game week 3 of the Premiership will know that we had a round of applause for both Joe and Steve Kerrison, who can also say they've competed in every season but have opted to retire from the sport of Powerchair football. So Nikki Baker, one of 4 players still competing. Can you two name the other 3 that were present in the 2006-07 season?
All players, yeah?
Yep.
So John Balding.
Yep.
I took the easy one there, Ellie.
Oh gosh. I honestly could not tell you.
I can confirm that the other two are Ed Common and technically Jamil Khan, although he had a sustained break away from Powerchair football, but he was present in 2006-07. Staying on the topic of Nikki Baker, she was part of one of the most successful defensive units in Powerchair football, playing a key role in Aspire's multiple Premiership winning side, and she was the designated goalkeeper, so to speak, in Aspire's 08-09 season, where they did not concede a single goal. So that in itself is impressive, but with an estimated, it's up for contention, 190 clean sheets. It's hard to tell, as data collection back in the day isn't what it is in 2025. She very possibly has the most clean sheets in National League history. So we've got Kath Goldsborough leading the way for the top for females in goal scoring. You've got Nikki Baker at the back. Two fantastic players. We now go on to women that have won the Premiership. I'm looking for 6 players.
Well, you just named Nikki Baker, so I'll steal that one. I'll let Ellie do her best, mate.
Rosie. Didn't Kath win a Premiership title, or am I totally wrong?
No, you're spot on. Nikki Baker has won the Premiership title 6 times. Kath McNichol, or Kath Goldsborough, has won it 3 times. Rosie Hodgson has won it twice. I'm looking for 3 more players.
Sally McNeil.
Sally McNeil has won a Premiership title.
How did I forget Sally? Wow. Oh.
2-2 a minute. Ellie.
Oh my word. This is so hard, and I don't know why.
It is hard, and I will say the answer because I was unaware. This was long before I was involved within Powerchair football. I'll give you one clue. Sisters. It should then just roll off the tongue. I can confirm that Georgia and Jessica Moat have been part of Premiership winning teams. So the only siblings to have won the Premiership. There's a stat for you.
Apologies to the Moat sisters. We didn't get them.
Yeah. If we go on to Rosie Hodgson, she is one of only 2 players to score in 2 different WFA Cup finals with goals against Villa Rockets in 16-17 and Northern Thunder in 18-19. Of course, the other one being John Balding. Another female that has scored in the WFA Cup final is that of Kath Goldsborough. I have asked Alex this already on the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast, so I'm going to put the pressure on you, Ellie. Hannah Hindley has played for 5 different National League clubs. She's the only player to do so and score for each of them. Can you name them?
She's currently at Muscle, isn't she?
She's yet to score for Muscles. This only encompasses teams that she's scored for. If she was to score for her current side, Muscle Warriors, she will extend her already record-breaking stat even further. So you've got Leeds. I'll give you Leeds Chariots and Leeds Dynamos. That's 2.
Manchester United.
Spot on. Manchester United.
Oh. Oh.
Think geography.
I'm not good at geography.
The other teams that Hannah Hindley has registered a National League goal for are Sale United and Telford.
Yes.
Continuing our record-breaking trend, Carolyn Goldsborough, or Kaz Goldsborough, has made huge contributions to officiating in Powerchair football, refereeing 224 National League games, which puts her third on the all-time list for matches officiated. They're not females, but I'm going to see if you two know who are the leading referees with the most games.
Oof. I'm gonna chip in with a guess and say, because his sons have been playing since the start and only just recently retired, I'm going to go with Mark Kerrison.
Mark Kerrison is one. Paul Pearson is the other. But back to females in Powerchair football. Millie Bean has also officiated over 100 matches, and alongside Kaz have officiated 3 WFA Cup finals together. And in recent years, we've also had multiple all-female officiating teams where Kaz and Millie have been supported by Angela Dixon and Megan Harley Buller, which hopefully in itself shows the progress we're making with increasing female representation across officials. We also have what I really hope is a one-of-a-kind stats in the fact that Amy and Annette Lee Julian, mother and daughter, to my knowledge, are the only parent-child combination to have played, certainly within our National League, but I would confidently say worldwide. In terms of mother-daughter, there is no one that can boast a similar stat. Very impressive. Across the National League's history, women have collectively scored over 1,000 goals. So a testament to the talent and the impact players have had. Obviously, the top scorers, we've mentioned Kath Goldsborough. You've got Rosie Hodgson behind her on 172. Amy Wharton on 81. Amy Lee Julian on 63. And Jessica Moat on 61. With Kath and Rosie top of that list, can you guess how many hat-tricks each of them have scored within the National League? You can take one each.
I'm going to go with 6 hat-tricks for Kath.
Oh, I'll go 8 for Rosie.
Alex, you're going to need to times yours by 4.
Wow.
And Ellie, you'll have to time yours by 2.
Oh,
Kath
dear.
Goldsborough has scored 24 hat-tricks and Rosie Hodgson has scored 16. So 2 fantastic players, 2 fantastic goal scorers. And to wrap things up in this Jeff at the Ref section, back to Nikki Baker, because I don't think people quite know how much of an influence she's had on Powerchair football as we know it in this country, or worldwide for that matter. In 2005, she became the first player to compete in another nation's tournament and win, playing in a World Invitational Tournament in Indianapolis as part of the Hollister's Freewheelers team. And she was also part of the first ever global Powerchair football delegation in Paris, helping to shape the formation of FITFA. And as part of that, she played in a historic match in Portugal that set the foundations for the worldwide version of the game, a moment that shaped the sport as we know it today. So Nikki Baker was there at the very, very start.
Incredible.
And that concludes the Jeff the Rest section.
Thank you, Jeff. Much appreciated.
Thoroughly enjoyed that little Jeff the Rest segment. I'm not gonna lie.
No, Alex and I always very much enjoy it. But we've just ticked over to nearly an hour and a half, so I think we will conclude things. I just think we can all kind of have our closing statements, but the message for me is clear from what Ellie said, from what her dissertation discovered, and it's about, if we want to increase female participation, we need to make sure that clubs are genuinely welcoming spaces for women and girls, and it's not just saying the sport is mixed gender and hoping that ticks the box. It's about making sure that females feel valued, feel supported and encouraged to get involved. We've spoken about how visibility is such a huge part about showing the next generation what is possible. So if clubs can actively promote female players, coaches and officials, it will send that clear message that women belong in this sport, and celebrating their achievements. We can do it better as an association. We've said this, that obligation to do so, and hopefully we can make a real difference. We've spoken about our exciting plans for the Female Powerchair Football Festival, but if anyone has any ideas or guidance on this subject, please feel free to get involved. Contact myself or Ellie, and let's make a real splash.
I'll let you go next, Ellie, and I'll finish up.
Yeah, I think definitely more in work does need to be done, and I know that the big workplace are, taking massive steps in terms of this festival, for which I am more than happy to speak with anyone who might be interested in attending, but also at club level, where we are kind of saying, give that welcoming space to new players that are female. We're not saying, it's feasible to host female-only days at club level, but the tips that I shared earlier are really ensuring that we create that initial comfortable space for girls to come and try the sport out, but also extending that to competitive integrity and kind of using the voiceless of females to understand what areas in which they would like to excel in themselves or the game as a whole. I really think we are getting that space and that platform in which that representation will come to the fore, and it will make a difference.
Thank you, Ellie. So I'm going to start off by saying, on behalf of WFA and WFA trustees, massive thank you for your insights, intellect, your knowledge, and what you've brought to this podcast, just as the podcast, but also what you've contributed in terms of those things as well to our discussions and knowledge in leadership scenarios. And you've said loads about the clubs and what that could do. So I'm going to reiterate my call to action, really, is to say that the WFA wants to be more inclusive and more open and more member-focused and member-led. That's something that we are keen on, and we know we need to work on. And so the support will be there for people that want to get involved in that. we are hopefully this is a demonstration that we're open to having voices from the community on a variety of subjects come in and be involved and influence and change us as an organisation. We've got a medium-term strategy, which is the headline is we're there to govern and grow, and that grow bit is really important, and we need to do that into the right directions, and more voices like Ellie's, and then more skills, intellect and knowledge like hers as well, coming into shaping policy, shaping how we operate, shaping the environment and the culture of the WFA is really important. We are very proud of who we are and that we are an inclusive organisation, but that doesn't mean that we sit on our laurels. We need to keep developing and leading the way. But massive thank you to Ellie for today. I've learnt a lot and sparked lots of ideas just from listening and reading your dissertations as well. So, many thanks.
Yeah, hopefully this can be one of many episodes if we really want to see through these plans, which we absolutely will. No doubt we'll have a follow-up episode for this later in the year. But anyway, thank you to everyone that has tuned in to this episode of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you so much.